Um, you are good, of course, and the reason you are good, happy people, is because Orlando Pirates have made it through the group stages of the CAF Champions League
Mm.
official after the 2-1 victory over the weekend against CR Belouizdad. And Chuck, we both sat here upon qualification for the Champions League, getting to the group stages, talking about what our expectations for Orlando Pirates is that they should at least get out of the group, which they've now done. Now
Mm.
that Orlando Pirates have qualified out of the group stages of the CAF Champions League, how far do you think they can go?
Man, it sounds very, very optimistic and very brave to say all the way to the final because when you qualify out the group stages, you're automatically in the quarterfinals, and I should think they should be able to win that first tie. And I think at that point, when you're in the semis, it's a toss up. Anything can happen. And my mood, or rather my confidence, is bolstered by the fact that when we first played Al Ahly at home, we were all over them. And yes, we know that they don't always play adventurous when they're away from home. They park the bus sometimes when they need to, and then in Cairo, obviously, they play a much better brand of football. But when I contrast the two games against ICR Belouizdad, when we went away, we scored two early goals. They came back, they dominated the second half. I thought to myself, that team dominated in the second half. They beat Al Ahly. They're going to be a good opponent when they come to Orlando. But we handled them quite comfortably. So that alone gives me so much confidence. When I look at the stats as well, that apart from Al Ahly, if I'm not mistaken, who have scored 12 goals in the group phases, we are amongst the top goal scorers. I think amongst three other teams who scored eight. Everyone else has scored less goals. So for me, goals output, the level of competition that we faced, and how we've acquitted ourselves. When I look at Usbis and Osasani, that partnership seems to be as good as the one next to Nonda because there's an understanding, there's leadership, it's solid at the back. When I look at the likes of Makaula, I think for me one of the best games for Van Rooyen. I've always said to myself, "Coach, he's good going forward, but going back, he's reactive. He's never quite in the right spot. He's good. He relies too much on his pace to catch up. But I think in this game, he was solid. He was great performer. So I think just based on that, Jay, just the feeling in terms of how we play and how we look against African opposition, I think, man, give us whoever in the quarterfinals and we'll handle business. And then the semis, we'll see. So I think confidence says all the way to the
Uh,
final.
I think Paris can go to the final as well.
Mm,
And maybe you might be wondering why not just say they can win it, right? Because I think winning the Champions League final is an absolutely different game as opposed to getting there. And we've seen South African teams, specifically, I'll mention, get to the final of a Champions League. We saw Kaizer Chiefs unfancied a few seasons ago. We've seen Pirates multiple times. We've seen Sundowns multiple times. The first time Sundowns lost to Al Ahly and then won it. We know Pirates won it, of course, back in the day. And then when they went to the final again, they lost it. Kaizer Chiefs went to the final and they lost the final. And you always have to account for Al Ahly, right? Regardless of what happens with their results in the group stages, because as you mentioned, we saw Al Ahly come to Alanda Stadium and they didn't come to play.
mm,
And that might fill you with confidence as a Pirates fan in the same way that as a Sundowns fan, when you saw Sundowns put five
mm,
past Al Ahly, that fills you with confidence that this is your season, you know? But it's a totally different game for those guys, particularly these teams for the North, especially Al Ahly when they're then in the final. They just know how
mm.
to win finals. They know how to win a like Champions League final. So I think it might be a too bold a step to say that I think they'll win the Champions League, but they are in with a chance to
Mm.
win the Champions League final. But I think getting to the final, because that includes games at Orlando, and that is very important for me. The biggest factor why I think Orlando Pirates can make it all the way to the finals, because they truly have a home ground advantage, and it's the altitude, it's the weather when you're playing against the northern teams during like in the afternoon, especially it is the fans, and it is how that relationship between the fans and this particular team has continued to develop under the tutelage of Coach Jose Rivero, because Coach Jose Rivero, the more I've listened to him post match in press conferences, as well as then seeing continuously, especially this season, his reaction to the crowd on the sidelines is very passionate, and
Mm.
his passion is directed towards the fans. He's I know this sounds impossible, but he's maintaining eye contact, it feels like, with the fans, and he's drawing them into backing this team, which is the hypothesis that was given by the main man behind Talking Buccaneers when we spoke to him about what is happening in Orlando, where about Tito specifically, actually, and he gave us the hypothesis that he thinks that the coach Jose Rivera is instructing Tito to stand on the ball, because when that happens, and we experienced this when we were in Orlando, and I've joked about this, that Tito could sneeze and the Pirates faithful, hey Tito, but there's an understanding that Coach Jose Rivera has with regards to his players, their personalities, Orlando Stadium, the personality of the Ghost, the humble people who are also the manufacturers of mob justice football, right? That when it comes together, Chuck, that is a cauldron. It's what you think about when you think about Champions League in Europe, like Champions League nights at Anfield, or when you have to go to Old Trafford when like United were in their pomp, or when you have to go to the Bernabeu. There's just an electricity, and I see that. I feel that when I'm watching Orlando Pirates at home. Orlando Pirates have a genuine home ground advantage, and I think then with the elements of everything else that I mentioned, along with the style of play, which lends itself to like being backed by the momentum that is given to you by the crowd. When it is one touch, two touch football, when it is very exciting, when it is Rele doing his thing, when it is Tito doing his thing, when it is Ngota going past his fullback, and when it is Dino overlapping and underlapping, and when it is Hoto showing up everywhere he's showing up and like bombarding the opposition box, I think anyone on the continent of Africa who then has to come to Orlando and play against all of that, they're going to find it difficult. And you're going to have that in the quarterfinals, you're going to have that in the semifinals. And yeah, you mentioned the goals. It's not just exciting. There are goals that are attached to the style of play. So I think those things, and as I mentioned before on our channel, that I do think this is Coach Jose Rivera's last season, based on what I saw with his emotions coming out after winning the MTN8 for a third consecutive time, and the statement we saw with regards to how he's missing his family, he's here without his family, and there's just something there where if it is his last dance, it feels as though it would be fitting, and it seems as if there's that messaging that has gone across to the team that it has to be the Champions League or the league or both in a utopian world. So yeah, I think Orlando Pirates can make it all the way to the final, and the main reason is the Orlando faithful, the faithful at Orlando Stadium.